It would be very hard for a company to develop their own marketing plan right now. What's your brand and what's your target audience? Like, that's a key aspect, right? You got to have that first.
There's a point in time in a business's life cycle that they're just probably doing some level of like guerrilla DIY marketing because there is not budget for this.
When I say brand, a lot of people just think logo. Brand is logo. It is the experience.
And Tyler, how much should we be spending on marketing?
What happens is a lot of times business looks at this marketer and they go, well, why can't you do all of this? And it's like, well, that's because that's 15 different disciplines.
Welcome to another episode of the Next Gen Strategies podcast. I'm taking the lead today because we're kind of going to get back into a marketing segment, and Grant's going to do a lot of the talking and I'm going to do the quizzing.
Yeah, no tax strategy in this one, which I'm a little bit disappointed by, but
yeah, well, I think the topic kind of came up today after some conversations Grant and I have been having, but it's this idea of the marketing in the middle. So, specifically businesses that are kind of in the sweet spot in size where they have some budget and some marketing and sales development is happening. Maybe it's not led by a specific person. Some things are happening here, some things over there. And I think Grant has got some really cool information to share about, the process of kind of trying to have one sole strategy to fulfill all of that marketing and development. And so that you can kind of figure out what's working and what's not, or at least have kind of a vision going forward. And I resonate with that just because I see that a lot on the finance side too, where there has to be one core focus and everything kind of blends around that and sticks to it. So I'm going to kind of shut up and let Grant kind of start this thing out. And I'll be here to ask all the dumb questions on some of the strategy he's going to talk about.
I just want to point something out here because we know we've been joking about this fireplace going on in the background, and we finally have it lit today because marketing is about to be fire coming out of my mouth. And
that.
So yeah, that's important. That's going to be really good for this. So anyway, but yeah, I'm really excited to kind of walk through a couple of different things. And to Tyler's point, this is for some of those businesses that have had, a lot of times it's been a lot of growth without a lot of marketing that I start to see where we might have some of these issues. And, obviously with the Next Gen Strategies podcast, we're always talking about scale and what's next and what are those things that business owners can be doing. And I have the privilege to work with a lot of different businesses and different industries and different kind of phases of growth, and as do you. And so like you said, a lot of times, you've got some stuff going on, but you're not exactly sure, is it the right things? And is it the things that are going to take me to that next step from a marketing standpoint? So oftentimes, these businesses get going so fast that you sometimes just need to say, let's just pause for a second. And let's reevaluate kind of what are we doing and what should we be hyper focusing on and what's really going to get to that next level of revenue.
So yeah, I think it's one of those things where, and maybe you tell me if I'm in the right headspace on the example you're talking about.
Yep.
Because I'll grab, a business's books and I'll see in there, there's always a marketing and advertising line for taxes. And it'll be they're throwing $500 a month of Facebook ads. And then they have some events they sponsor. And then they did a website redevelop in the middle of the year. I just always see a little activity in there. So it looks like they're spending some money on it, but I don't know, especially when I'm advising them, I don't know how that fits in the whole picture for them.
Yeah. And that's definitely a piece of it. I think oftentimes not only taking a look at that, but also taking a look at the marketing that maybe a person is doing and it's taking up their capacity in a way that maybe isn't the best or isn't the right fit of skill sets. So yeah, I think really three different things I want to go over today. It's kind of like that. What's that kind of, if you were to say okay, so if I resonate with this, right? I'm one of those business owners. So what does this look like for me? And what are some of those actionable things? And, the first one is really kind of, I'll talk about each one of these individually, but really the first piece is what's your brand and what's your target audience? That's a key aspect, right? You got to have that first. The second piece of it is then, building the plan. So what does that plan look like to get things done? Is it, is it some one-time things that you have to get done? Is it some ongoing things that you need to do? Is there training and development that needs to happen? So that's equally important. And then the final piece is, okay, great. So I understand who I am, who I serve. I now understand kind of what I'm doing from a plan standpoint. Now, how do I actually get that work done? And how much of it can I get done? What should be the priority? And we'll talk about kind of all three pieces of that puzzle.
So my question is if we're talking about businesses that are in the middle, what are the characteristics that you see for businesses like this? Because in my mind, okay, are these businesses that have hired a marketing person? Like, who's responsible for like help setting this tone? Like, how does this all work? And what type of businesses are these that are kind of stuck here?
Yeah, I'll definitely give kind of two different examples as I kind of go through these, just because it's, me, I'm a visual and person. So if I can think about like, what do these businesses look like? So I'll give two examples. One would be like a B2C business, right? Business to consumer business. So great example, like I'm going to use is like, let's say I'm a restaurant owner and I have a couple of different restaurants, right? And then I'm also going to use some business to business, B2B examples of, let's say, for example, I'm a software company. And I'm selling a software to a business owner to make their lives easier for something. Okay. So like, I'm going to use kind of those two examples just so that, again, I know we have a kind of a plethora of different viewers on our podcast, and then I'll kind of walk through those.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So kind of starting off with the first thing, right, is like I said, first piece is your brand and your messaging and really understanding your target audience. And if you don't have that piece of it, everything else that you try to do from a marketing standpoint is probably not going to be the greatest, right? So I'm going to give the example of a restaurant first, right? So let's say, for example, right, I'm a restaurant owner. I've got a couple different locations. Maybe one's in like, multiple different cities, whatever it is, right? One of the things you absolutely have to understand is who you are as a brand and how do you fit into the kind of the competitive space, right? So let's say, I'm a privately owned restaurant. Maybe, I'm competing against, I'm just gonna use a Mexican restaurant because you and I are eating Mexican restaurants all the time.
Margaritas.
Big Mexican restaurant people, right? So this will be, this will be super easy, right? So let's say I'm a Mexican restaurant. I'm in a couple different cities, let's call them small town USA type cities, right? And so, I'm competing against, your Taco Bells and your Chipotles, right? Let's just say that. Well, if I'm that restaurant and I'm thinking about like from a brand and messaging standpoint, right? Like, where do I fit into the mix? And so you need to really understand kind of the competitive marketplace, right? So first piece of it is, who am I as a company, right? So who am I trying to attract? Well, more than likely, if you're a private owned Mexican restaurant, you're probably going to be more expensive than like, say, a Taco Bell or a Chipotle, right? Because you don't have the mass and the scale that those different companies are able to provide. But at the same point in time, you may be more expensive, but you might be able to provide a better service or a higher quality product because you're sourcing local, food, for example. So you need to understand all those attributes, right? Because in order for you to finally kind of get ahead and really make sure your marketing is resonating, like, you got to have that brand nailed down.
So if you are, when I think about a Mexican restaurant, you're kind of caught between maybe two markets, right? The one market is like the food that's like yours. So the Taco Bells of the world, Chipotles. But then your other market, at least in my mind, when I'm deciding where we eat, because my wife always says it's your decision where to eat. We went fast food or we went sit down. Right. And typically Mexican is a sit down restaurant. So it's kind of competing also with Texas Roadhouse and Applebee's.
Right.
So I know you have a lot of experience with business owners that own multiple types of businesses, but sometimes businesses that are in the same kind of, field. So if you have a couple of different restaurants and stuff like that, there probably is that trying to figure out who are you competing against and where's your sweet spot, I guess.
Yeah. And I think that the important thing is the best piece to understand who you are and what you do is to ask your customers, do a little bit of research up front, right? And think about the words that they use when they talk about your business. Look at the reviews they might be leaving you on Google, or maybe there's chatter on social media about why people love your place. Because I can tell you that most private owned businesses, when they're saying, well, I'm competing against my large competitors, are saying, well, we compete on service. We have higher quality. And that's great. But that does not mean anything to the customer.
Right.
A lot of times you have to use the right words.
Well, I always say how.
Add more. Yeah, how? Like, what does that mean to me? Because customers are selfish, right? What's in it for me? And so you have to go one step further than just saying, well, best expertise and best service. Yeah. Well, what does that really mean in the words of your customer?
And I like this example because now in the last few years, ever since COVID, Mexican restaurants do compete on both sides of that market because they compete with sit-down restaurants. Mm-hmm. They also compete with Taco Bell because now I can either call and pick up food or I can Uber Eats it to my house.
Yep.
So they can compete with both, and they got to figure out, okay, what are they better at, or what's different about them from a takeout standpoint? Like that quality or authenticity. And then what's the customer experience in the sit down side too? Because they almost have those two different sides.
Yeah, exactly right. And I'll give another example just real quick of we're talking about restaurants, but an even better example might be like an independent grocer. So like if you're going to like an IGA or your mom and pop shop that's down the road, right? Like they're competing against the Walmarts and the Targets and the Krogers of the world. And so you have to be really unique because again, more than likely you're going to have a higher price. It's not going to be, you don't have the marketing and brand power, staying power, some of these other giants. So like you got to think a little bit differently in terms of like, what's that messaging for my customer? Why are they coming to me? And a lot of times it's because a lot of times people just want to support local, right? They want to support the local entrepreneur and they want to do those things. So understand that from a brand standpoint before you can really start saying like this types of, marketing that I want to do, for example.
I can give a fun example about Mexican restaurants because like a lot of people probably listen to this, like your run of the mill Mexican restaurant, like they're so similar. They're not a lot of differences between them. There was one in Cincinnati that we went to that just like sticks in the back of my brain. Anytime I'm near that area, I'm going there because it was the most insane experience I've ever had at a Mexican restaurant. They had this signature drink menu that gave you the most outlandish drinks you've ever seen. Like it would come out in a cup this tall with lights on it and all this stuff. And then every like 30 minutes, mariachi band played like right in front of your table. So like that was in my mind now I go, that is the restaurant I go to when I'm in that area. Not only just that's the Mexican restaurant I want to go to.
I'm glad you said that because when I say brand, a lot of people just think logo.
Yeah.
Logo and colors.
You're saying brand's experience.
Brand is logo. It is the experience. It is what do your customers feel from you and your brand or your company when they interact with you. And so you have to define that, right? And if you're having trouble defining that, like there's plenty of resources out there. Like you can hire an expert in it. You can go to an agency. Like you can do some Googling online, honestly. But like to really define that brand, you need to understand who you are, who you serve, why it's unique that you serve them. And I say like, what's your elevator pitch? If you were to tell me in 30 seconds who you are, what you do, and why you do it, and who you serve, like you need to kind of nail down the elevator pitch. And then the second piece of that, if you can do the elevator pitch and then say like, and these are the three things that make us different.
So I have one more
things
question for you on brand messaging and target audience. And you're going to love me for this because it's something I think probably came from you at some point in time. But I want to get your opinion on, okay, you're talking about a restaurant, right? That has multiple locations or something like that. What do you think about, we know right now that there's like a very popular setup of having like an elevated experience or an elevated product that you pay a little bit more for, when you see someone who has multiple businesses in that space, do you think that there's value to kind of having alignment across those businesses that you own that stay in that same kind of target audience and brand messaging rather than say restaurant? If you had three restaurants, one's fine dining, one's fast food, and one's middle of the road? Or do you think you have three restaurants and they're all kind of in that same area that's targeting those same clients? Because I've seen popularity with that, and it seems like it would make your marketing plan easier. And the term I was going to use is like, then you could have maybe umbrella branding.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. And I think that is something where a lot of companies, I'm going to take one step out of restaurants. I think a lot of companies struggle with that concept. And so for example, right, like you're talking about, like I've got a premium side of my business that I want to serve, but then I've also got maybe more of like a commodity side. And you're trying to figure out like, well, as I develop as a company and do I have different products and services, like do I keep them all underneath the same, brand, right? Or do I have to start a different company and a different brand because now I have a different target audience? I think it depends on the industry. And I think that a lot of times I'm a stronger advocate of making, if it's very clear that you have a very different customer and from one side to the other, then I'm an advocate for customer facing, splitting that brand potentially. Yeah. I think more often than not that is probably the way to go, unless you have very, very specific, like defined services. Like if you're fast and you're cheap, like that does not typically bode well to be served at a higher end establishment, right? Because then you have that brand confusion, and you really have to embrace from a brand standpoint, like Again, if you're a fine dining restaurant and you're a high end offering, you're selling, the really fancy drinks and stuff, like, yeah, you might want to include like the Bud Light on draft or whatever for the people. But like to then go like, oh, but then I'm also going to spin up, a cheapo taco truck with this and this and this and this. Like that's where you start to maybe have a brand issue. Versus like if you just split it off and said, as a company, like, sure, I can probably buy in bulk better when I have multiple different things, but I might slice and dice and offer that differently to the forward facing customer side.
I wanted your opinion on that because it just seems like it seems like an interesting route to go and just be like, I'm going to stay on brand how I expand, because then like people know this, when it's new, they're going to go, I can expect the experience from the previous business I was at because it's part of their business. So it's an experience I expect. I'm already a big fan. Boom, it's consistent. I've just interesting stuff I've seen lately, and it seems like it's doing well. Yeah,
and like I said, it really depends. Like there's use cases one way or the other, and it really depends on the product and service. But I would say like stay true to that experience, and again, I think people are willing to have a different type of experience if they trust one brand, but then maybe your other brand is completely different offering, but the trust was already in that strength of that brand. And you say, oh, by the way, I had this fine dining establishment. I just opened up this random food truck that's a lot cheaper, faster, whatever. Like the food truck might say, oh, hey, by the way, we're owned by these guys. We have a different experience.
Yeah.
We're a different brand. We have a different channel. But hey, by the way, you guys already love and trust these guys. This is why you should go with us.
Yeah. And before you move on, really what you're saying is that you have to have an actionable kind of plan around that and not be willy-nilly on how you do that.
Right. Yep. No, exactly right. And the same thing goes for products and services, right? Like, there's, if let's say you're a manufacturer and you're making a widget and, you used to do like high quality, super custom, maybe you're engraving something, maybe you're, being very specific with the engineering around that. And all of a sudden you have a guy that comes in and says, hey, you have the machines, but I actually need you to just do a really simple part, and I need you to print 5,000 of them, and do as many of them as possible. Like, we're not really interested. Like, we don't need a lot of time spent on the quality. We just need like mass velocity and stuff. And so that could be another example where it's like, well, gee, as a business owner, do I keep those underneath my umbrella? Right. If I'm going to market and I've been selling quality and custom engineering and all these other things, but now I got somebody who just wants me to, slice it and dice it and let's get it going. And we got to have mass production. Like, that becomes another type of conversation. And so, do you just, do you have a GC strategies of the custom side and then a GC strategies that's just this, high velocity manufacturing? Like that becomes a different conversation too.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, that's a really big piece. And I think honestly, like when you come from a marketing standpoint, like you have to understand where you fit in the market. So again, understand who you are, what you do, kind of have the elevator pitch, and then understand those three things that make you different, right? So like if you can hang your hat on those elements, like you're going to be in good shape to move on to the next piece, which is really kind of that build the plan and build the budget.
Yep, that makes sense.
So kind of talk about the plan and budget, right? Like a lot of times with the business owners that I'm talking to, and again, the ones that you're working with, they are doing things, but they don't necessarily have a great method to the madness of why they're doing it. So one of the things I always encourage folks is like, okay, so like once we've gone through this, brand positioning, the messaging piece of it, and we start to build a plan, like before you can build a plan, you got to understand what all are you doing, right? You have to kind of assess what it is that you have. And so, you should be taking a look at, one, I would say take a look at the tactics, right? It could be, take a look at your website, take a look at what have you done are you doing things on social media? Is it being effective? Like, do you have analytics set up? Can you tell? Do the things that you have in place now match back to that new brand or new messaging that you just talked about? So you have to evaluate those things. And then the other piece that you need to evaluate, and this is the piece where I would say people miss the boat all the time, is you have to look at the people. And you have to look at the partners that you have and the folks that you have internally, because a lot of times what I see is as a company grows, especially in marketing, and for all you marketing people out here, I know this is gonna hit home. A marketer might be hired in to do something when they first start. They might be hired in to do social media. And as the company grows, there becomes more of a demand on this marketer. And so what that person whose skill set was maybe doing video and social media and stuff, all of a sudden is being asked to now do email. They're being asked to be a website developer. They're being asked to do SEO. They're being asked to do paid advertising. And then what happens is a lot of times business looks at this marketer and they go, well, why can't you do all of this? And it's like, well, that's because that's 15 different disciplines. And this poor person, right, has been trying to do these things. And so I think that, as businesses are really starting to scale, like you have to evaluate the skill sets, right, too. And who is doing these things? And is it the right fit? Or can we better align something to have a higher quality output? A lot of times saving some cost. And you can have a higher quality output with something. That person's going to be happier. You're going to realign efforts. And the same thing if you're using an agency or a freelancer, like they're same things going to go there too. So you got to evaluate the channels and evaluate the folks that are working with them.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like in my head too, that it's always good to have that at least one person in the business that's boots on the ground and has maybe the marketing hat on or has a core responsibility there. But I think what I'm hearing you say is that when you hired that person, their thing they're really good at, they probably are good at. And then there's 15 other marketing things that are going to happen as your business grows. Yep. So maybe you should be looking at what resources you can provide to that person that they can help navigate and be a part of, but they can kind of stick with what they're really good at. And you can throw some other resources in talent, whether it's another hire or it's someone like you or an agency or something like that can really build it out, and they're doing it with expertise and not stretching someone thin.
Absolutely. And I think there's kind of two different sides to marketing people too. There's the creative. There's the person who is fantastic at creating something visually, creating something with audio. It's design, it's video, it's photography, it's understanding like how does the brand look and feel, and I can create these things. And then there's the what I'm gonna call the project management side or the coordinator piece of it, where it's like that is oftentimes a very much overlooked skill set in marketing, to be able to hear what's coming in from a CEO, hear what's coming in from sales, hear what's coming in from finance, be able to move those pieces around, help get deadlines done, stay super organized, be able to articulate back. Like those are two very, very different subjects. And many times I see that the best marketing departments have both of those folks in place, or maybe they've got a creative, a project manager, and somebody who's also here. But like you got to have a mix of those two, because if you almost every single company is going to lean one way or the other. Yeah, they're either going to have a great communicator, great manager, somebody who gets these things done, but the output just lacks, or it's vice versa. You have a great creative output, but nobody understands who, where, or why that's going on, and is it working?
That sounds like two different versions of a hot mess, right? Yeah. The ones that just creatively are amazing, but just organizationally it's a disaster. Yep. Or strategic or planning. But then the other side, great strategy and plan, and they're duds.
Yep, exactly right. And I'm a dud, right? Like I love telling people that. Like I am so much more on the strategy and the planning and all those things. I can't draw a stick figure. Yeah. Like it's crazy. But like so like you just have to understand that and be able to evaluate that. But yeah, like again, so you got the brand messaging part, right? That's the first piece. Understanding your target audience. Then the second piece is, okay, let's assess what we're doing. Is it working? Is it not working? Where are we at from a channel standpoint? What are the tactics in place? Who are the people that are in place?
I thought of something funny.
Go ahead.
We had a conversation yesterday, and I'm like, hey, let's do this, and that for the podcast. And you said, we need a brand messaging and target audience first. That's tactical. And you were yelling at me, and I'm like, wow, he's right. Yeah, it's one foot in front of the other here, I guess. But you know me, I'm sitting here like, go. Type A, operations guy here.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
But it's on brand.
It is. Coming soon. We're going to be, start trying to share some of these podcasts and do some more stuff with like email and Ty's over here going, let's build the list. Let's start the email, get the platform going. And I'm looking at Ty going, what are we talking about? How often are we going to do this? What tool are we using? And Ty goes, he's right. So it's like it's like when I try to give tax strategy and he stops me and tells me the IRS is going to knock down the door. But anyway,
it's a perfect example though. Of like, I think what you're saying here is this is almost like an order of operations.
It is. Yeah. Yep. Exactly right. So brand target, brand messaging, target audience, nailed it. Right. take a look at what we're doing. Where do we need to be? What are the different things that are performing well from a tactic standpoint, person standpoint? Fantastic. Okay, great. So now, and let's say, so now let's say we build this plan, right? And typically as part of these plans, like you're going to have things that, are going to need fixed, or there's like, maybe there's a one-time thing that you need to get done. Like maybe you got to rebuild a website, or maybe you need to go through and update all of your social channels because you have 6 different types of graphics that are out there.
Yeah.
Or maybe, your internal, you've got a bunch of sales collateral, or trade show material and stuff. And you all look at each other and you go, none of this is correct anymore. And we needed to like literally just flush it and go throw it in the dumpster. Or you might look at it around and be like, oh, 10% of this is still good, but the other 90%, like, get it out of here. Don't let anybody else use it anymore because it's no longer on brand. So like you do those things and then you set up that plan. So you've got that foundation of, I know we need to do this, this, and this. And then you start to figure out, okay, so how are we going to execute? Right. Which is really part 3. So we've got this marketing plan. We've got a list of all the things that we know we need to get done. And then it's how you're going to execute, and what do you prioritize first? And I always tell folks in this final phase of execution, like maybe this is a personal thing. I think a lot of marketers would probably agree. Maybe some wouldn't. You have to start with your foundation, which is like your website and your channels. Though I've talked about website is becoming a little bit less important now than what it had been before, just because of all the things happening with Google and SEO changes.
But I'm sure you still need a good, clean website that's on brand and has the foundations.
You do. And I always say, like, it's important for the customer, like from like making sure, like, if you're thinking about website, and everybody, a lot of times within an organization, like that becomes the easiest way for everybody to have input into something, because like, if you're doing website copy and you're talking about a product or service, or you're talking about, or you're doing a video for the website, or like you're positioning like your navigation and stuff, like a lot of the times, like that is how folks can visually like say like, oh no, like we should move something up a page because of the priority, or that doesn't sound right. I don't talk like that. I've found that when you do the website first, that is the easiest way to get input from non-marketers. And then you can tell everybody, hey, if it's on the website, that's our gold standard. And so I'm going to use this piece of content, or how we talked about this on the website or our messaging. When you see something on social media, or you ask why we're doing an email campaign around something, I can turn around and say, well, I'm using that kind of website. Remember our agreed upon stuff, right? Because that's natural, right? Like, folks want to have input in that. And especially like sales teams, if you've got sales teams, like if we can nail it on the website first and make sure we're feeling good there, we can start to articulate down into the other channels. And by the way, a lot of times you can repurpose the content. So anyway, but that's kind of, to your point, like that's order of operations. Brand and target audience, right? Define those things, have your elevator pitch, understand, who it is that you're serving and what are the 3 differentiators, figure out the plan, go through, understand like, what am I doing great? Where am I struggling? Where are there's opportunities? Build the plan out. And then you can say, okay, now how are we going to get it done? Like if you can, and I make that sound easy and it's not, but sometimes like if you can just kind of wrap your head around like, I know I need to make a change. These are the different things that you should really be thinking through.
Well, I'm going to pick your brain here because I get this question a lot, and I probably am the worst person to answer it, but I always get, Tyler, how much should we be spending on marketing? And then I'm sitting there going 0 because, I know you have to spend on marketing. We just had a conversation or some chat on LinkedIn, something about marketing's an investment, maybe not an expense. But I think I want to walk through something here, and maybe you can help us. And I know you can't nail anything down, but there's a point in time in a business's life cycle that they're just probably doing some level of like guerrilla DIY marketing because there is not budget for this.
Right.
That is something that happens. And I'm going to be the person that says that's you until, as an owner, you are satisfied with your take home pay to live on and all that fun stuff. And now you got some excess. Like you probably should be doing that there. And then at least you have somewhat of a foundation that Grant's talked about to do yourself and try to get there. But, when you start talking about the businesses that, the bases are covered, or say they got investing and they have cash flow to start looking at marketing, I'm sure, there's caveats to all this, but like, what should they be spending, or who should they be talking to do this and facilitate it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I try to talk marketing budget for me, like I try to say is like a percentage of sales is the easiest way. And marketing budgets are so all over the place because it's depending on industry and it's dependent on how aggressive you want to be in your goals. So like if I want to grow 5% year over year, like you can have some moderate marketing spend, but if I want to grow 25%, like you better have some anticipation. But no, a lot of times I'm seeing folks come in, anywhere like on the low end, 2% of top line sales up to I've got ones that are 10 to 12% because they are just they're dumping the gas in the fire, or maybe they've got an investor who was able to help with some additional spend or do something different there, or maybe they got an opportunity with a great partnership that is just the business isn't quite there yet, but like they're investing in a great partnership with something and it costs a lot of money. So like, but no, I'd say, if you're between that 2 and 8%, like I think realistically, I don't know, Mr. CFO, like I think
that's why I asked.
That's a pretty reasonable thought. And if you're trying to figure out like, okay, so like, and then how do I disseminate that down?
Well, that's why I always say like, I can't tell someone their budget for marketing without any of the stuff that you've went over here, because like, I think this even goes back to our strategic planning episode, that there's a goal of some sort for the business, whether it's we're going to grow by 10%, 20%, or we're going to increase a profit margin. And there's always the how behind that. So whatever the how is, I think drives the marketing and then also drives the budget. And I can play with the numbers on the back end to see what we can allocate towards it. But like you said, you got to look at your situation and how you're growing. You may have some sources that you're growing basically for free through natural business development and partnership referrals and things like that.
Sure.
But I'm assuming that percentage of budget is going to drive based on, well, here's an area we have not entered and this area costs money, the ads, website redesign, who knows what, the events, stuff like that. So I think you have to like zoom in way out. You got to have that structural strategic plan for the business. And this is a piece of it. And that helps drive the budget. And it's not an easy question for me to answer or you to answer until we know what the goals are and what it takes to do those goals and make them happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that just being transparent with, with the business owners and leaders through that process of like, hey, like, sometimes you need to drive the Ford Focus before you can go get the Ferrari, right? Like sometimes I think a lot of times, or somebody wants a Ferrari, but they only want to pay for a Ford Focus, right?
Yeah.
So like, and whether it's marketing, whether it's an IT person, whether it's somebody with accounting, like you just have to be able to have those realistic conversations sometimes and ask different folks. One of the things that I'm really finding with some people that I work with, and I know some people you work with, is like industry and peer groups are just so easy and good for businesses. Like I know so many folks that, if you're, if I'm a marketing company, right? Like I want to get into a group of other people who are doing marketing and ask them, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like what do you do differently to grow? And what are you spending on marketing? And does your, do you do social media? Are you on TikTok? Should I be doing something else? Like reach out to those peers that are in your industry, and you may have to look like if you have a very niche type of thing, like you may have to look a little bit further, but like that's sometimes the best way to start figuring out like, okay, I follow this company. I want to be like this company at some point in time. Like reach out to them and go ask them, be like, what are you doing? Like, how did you get here?
Well, and I kind of wanted to throw out the idea too, that once you start getting to the point, because you can see it like on your P&L, like you're going to see you spent, like almost everyone naturally has a marketing advertising spend of some sort.
Yeah.
Like every business has it. It's thrown there on their P&L. Start looking at it and see what you're spending now as a percentage of revenue, because it might make sense to stop doing that. Well, I talked about it earlier. It's like, oh, you spend this much monthly on ads because you just thought that was the right thing to do. And then you got this here and you do this event here. Like it might make sense just to take that money and invest it into one of these plans. Because like I'm sure you've been able to develop a plan here that has no ad spend, and it's here's our brand and vision and everything we're doing, and this is how we're going boots on the ground and doing it. So like starting here to at least understand, how you could deploy a budget is better than like throwing mud at the wall and going, well, maybe we should go from $500 a month on Facebook to $1,000 and see if that works.
Yeah.
Because I see it all the same. There's always a spend for most part. It's just what's driving it. And the throwing the mud at the wall thing, I think is you're like putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah, no, it's 100% right. And, that's where I say marketing has become very complicated there's so many different distribution channels and things you'd be doing. And there's so many different niches. So like, it would be very hard for a company to develop their own marketing plan right now and to figure out what's going on and what they should be doing and what's realistic and how do you like, there's just so many things. And so I absolutely like whether you're reaching out to, like a fractional CMO like me, there's some really kick butt agencies that are out there, especially some agencies that are maybe niched down into certain verticals. I really would go consult and talk to a couple of different ones. Like you should absolutely do your vetting and like figure out, but like the first thing I'd be looking for is listening to them to hear like, what's your process?
Yeah.
If anybody comes in, they just start spouting tactics like, well, you know what, this is what we can do. We're going to do email. We're going to do this and this. And they don't ask you key questions about your business and what you do and like your tools and stuff. Like I'm going to say like as a business owner, like that should be some red flags for you.
There has to be a discovery phase with some soul searching.
Yeah.
So you know what the business wants to do.
Yeah. And the other piece of that too, and again, I know a lot of agencies, some local here, some that are all over the country, but like you got to have like a good fit with your marketing people. And that's a part that sometimes people don't talk about is like marketing has a lot of like, there's subjective and objective with marketing, but like at the end of the day, like you want to have a connection to your marketer so that they can kind of like, they got to be an extension of you.
Yeah.
So if you're a business owner or a leader, like you have a certain way you talk, you have a certain way that you present yourself, you have a certain way that you want your customers to have an experience. And so you want to probably have a marketing team that you feel comfortable with from a personal level that, oh yeah, like these guys get it. Like they understand, like I could see them, like I would put them in front of my customer because from a value standpoint or how they understand what I'm saying and go about things like, it makes a big difference. And I'll give you an example of that, Ty, is, there's some very large agencies in like New York City and LA who are right now, they're trying to kind of come in and talk to some Midwest companies and they're coming in with all these different tool stacks and we can do this, and this. And, business owners are kind of like, they don't understand. They don't understand our customer. They don't understand the regionality.
They call it soda and not pop.
Yeah. Like they don't, I don't think they know they just don't know our customer. And that's one of the biggest complaints I hear is like when marketing fails, it's oftentimes I hear the business leader go, they didn't understand who we are, what we did. And so there's definitely sometimes some regionality to, marketing, again, depending on what it is. And oftentimes there's a lot to say for somebody who can really, they're specific in a niche. And so like they know how to sell restaurants, like they specialize in restaurants and they know the right questions to ask to get to that.
Well, and I'm going to kind of wrap this thing up, but if you found this intriguing and you're sitting there sweating and going, well, maybe I should do a plan too. I mean, I would really encourage you to reach out and comment or reach out to Grant, because if Grant can't do it, he knows someone who can. Yeah. You have an extensive network and I think you do a really good job of pointing people in the right direction in just the field of marketing. Like you said, there's just so many different areas to be an expert in. Yeah. And you've done a really good job of building out a network and being able to refer things to people that you think would do a great job. Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm probably kind of anti-sales sometimes because I'm very quick to say no. Yeah. Nope, can't do that. But you're right. Like, and you do too. Like we take a lot of pride in being able to say like, I don't know anything about that, but I follow somebody who does. Let me put you in contact with us. Yeah, absolutely. Those are absolutely things that I would, love to be able to help with. Yeah. So just wrapping this thing up, guys, I think what was great here on this episode was that we kind of got an understanding of, with marketing, it seems like it's really hard right now to execute a plan by yourself. There just seems to be so many things in it. And I've fell victim to this 1,000 times where like my mind changes every 3 weeks and I'm doing too much. And it's just, Grant caught me the other day on the podcast, just getting ahead of myself. So I think we learned some really foundational stuff here about how there's an order of operations to this. And it gives you a place to kind of say, this is what we decided on, and this is how we're going to fulfill from here. And I found that really helpful. I learned a lot. I hope you did too. So stay tuned. We'll have some really good episodes coming up with some guests and maybe a few more with me and Grant. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. See you later.
Thanks again for joining us today on the Next Gen Strategies podcast.
Be sure to follow the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you really enjoyed it, give us a share on any of your favorite social media channels.
And don't forget to leave us a review.